Hey everyone, you made it to Season 2, Episode 3 of the Wassmuth Center Voices of Idaho podcast. We're glad to have you. The following are two stories that have influenced Idaho human rights activist Joanne Kachigian to become the Upstander that she is today. Please enjoy.
Two experiences influenced me to become an Upstander. First, I'm a child of genocide survivors. The Armenian Genocide of 1915, the first genocide of the 20th century when nearly 2 million Christian Armenians were annihilated by the Turks of the Ottoman Empire. Turkey still denies the genocide. My mother, Juhar, was 12 years old when her entire family of 46 people was massacred. She was the sole family survivor. She watched her father and brothers and the other men of the town being seized and dragged off. Then she heard the gunshots that announced their execution. The women and children and the elderly were left without defenders. Juhar was discovered the next morning hiding in a pit and forced at gunpoint to join the others on a treacherous 10-month death march over mountains and desert to Aleppo, Syria. My mother saw the severed arms, legs, and hands of butchered Armenian girls floating in the river or washed up on the shore. She had to drink that same water to survive. She saw mothers who were too weak from starvation and exhaustion to carry their babies any further, so they handed them to strangers passing by, hoping their babies would somehow survive. After walking for 10 months, Juhar was purchased as a slave by a rich Turk. She was stripped of her Armenian identity. She was forced to give up her Armenian name and language and become Turkified. About 6 years later, she asked to move to an orphanage run by American missionaries who posted the names of the orphans on church doors and in American newspapers. 2 brothers who had fled to America before the genocide discovered her name in the newspaper and arranged her marriage to a friend, a naturalized Armenian-American citizen who would later become my father. This terrified, traumatized young girl, who had arrived with her name pinned on her dress, like many other immigrants on the ship, met and married a total stranger who was 12 years her senior. But I didn't know my mother's story until I was 42 years old, when I persuaded her to let me record it on a tape recorder. She had been silent all those years. She refused to talk to me and said, "Better to forget." But she was an eyewitness to history, and I wanted my family and the world to know her story. My brave and stoic, humble mother would be shocked to know that her story lives on today at a listening station at the Anne Frank Human Rights Memorial here in Boise. My father, Sarkis, spoke 5 languages. He was a foreman at a factory where many immigrants worked. In Turkey, he had witnessed the beheading of his brother by a Turkish soldier. This no doubt contributed to his alcoholism and probable depression, or PTSD, which led to his suicide when I was 5 years old. My mother was left to raise their 7 children alone. She was too proud to accept public assistance, so my older brothers worked in the factory while they were in high school so we could continue to live in the company house. My sister Natty, at age 18, assumed the role of our surrogate parent. The resilience of my parents and other family members no doubt influenced me to be an Upstander. The second influential factor was my idealism. In 1961, during my senior year at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, a recruiter from the newly established Peace Corps visited the campus. I secretly applied, fearing humiliation in case I failed to be accepted for training. And then one morning, there it was, a telegram inviting me to Peace Corps training at the University of Pittsburgh for the first Peace Corps program in Liberia, West Africa. I hugged my mother and screamed, "I'm going to Africa! I'm going to Africa!" She replied sternly in her broken English, "One daughter in Africa is enough," because my sister Anna was a medical missionary in Swaziland, South Africa at the time. America is best country. You stay here. Get office job. You marry nice boy. Why are you going to throw away your college business, your college degree? You going to live in dirt, sickness, disease. I kept protesting. I wanted to help people and learn about the world. I didn't realize that she wanted to protect me from hardship and danger, as she had known. Finally, wagging her finger in my face, she proclaimed, "You gonna come home on first airplane because you no can pick up your underwear." I remembered her challenge whenever I faced adversity in Africa. I lived for 2 years in the African bush in a mud house without electricity or running water. The Peace Corps opened my eyes to the unfairness of life in terms of the lack of medical care, the high infant mortality rate, malnutrition, malaria, lack of sanitation, poor or non-existent education, inadequate government, and more. I met brave students who walked 5 miles to school, walking on their hands and deformed knees. And I worshiped in my village church with lepers from the largest leper colony in West Africa. It was one of the most profound and rewarding experiences of my young life, and it helped prepare me for the human rights challenges that lay ahead in America. My name is Joanne Kachigian. I'm a human rights activist in Boise and the grandmother of 5.
The following is a song by Kevin Arnsman. The song starts with an abridged version of Martin Niemöller's First They Came quotation, and then, as the artist describes, it continues with a contemporary perspective based on the biblical character Esther. This is For Such a Time as This. And as usual, to submit a song to be aired on the podcast, you can do so at info@waspmuscenter.org.
First they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. Growing in a strange new land, a land of opportunity. My eyes were wide, so much to try, no limit I believed. A pretty smile, no faults on file, no reason to dismiss. Kept up with style, met every try, for such a time as this. Growing as an introvert in a land of make-believe, to be myself and no one else, if only I could breathe. No confidence in residence, my fortune for a kiss. So incontent, no hesitance, for such a time as this. Beware the lies that so divide and greet us with the kiss. And quick betray the true decay so many seem to miss. It's up to you to see right through the call from the abyss, and speak for right through this dark night, for such a time as this. Some a world of treats for drinks. Some are told, don't break the mold, the single path to bliss. But we are bold, not bought nor sold, not frozen by the risk. The hope we hold, the truth we told, for such a time as this. Where the lies that so divide and greet us with the kiss, and quick betray the true decay so many seem to miss. It's up to you to see right through the call from the abyss. Speak for right through this dark night, for such a time as this. We speak for right through this dark night, for such a time as this.
Thank you, Joanne. This is the Voices of Idaho with Dan Prinzing and Adam Thompson.
Hey there.
Season 2, we're focusing on being an upstander. Joanne, you have just shared with us a background story that when folks see you, they don't know that. They don't realize that story that so shaped who and what you are. Do you think that somewhere in your DNA, the attitude of being an upstander was just always there?
I talked with my older brother, Martin, who's 94 years old recently, and he thinks it was something innate. You know, we grew up in this immigrant home, and we were just taught to be good citizens, be honest, keep your clothes clean, because we didn't have much clothes. You know, you had to wear the same dress over and over. And so we think the example of our parents, somehow that just must have, because all of us turned out to be, you know, decent people.
So it is that shaping force, whether acknowledged at the time or not. It's just this was the environment in which you were growing up. This is what we learn and carry from that. What are the actions that you chose then? How were you going to show that you're an upstander?
Well, setting an example, treating people well, the way I would expect to be treated. And I have to say, I was always treated well. We were respected, even though we were very poor, because we just had high principles and law-abiding and caring about other people. And, yeah.
Well, we always articulate in our upstander programming that it is the act of being an upstander, the ACT. And what you've just illustrated for us, it is that T in the act, which is teach by example of how you live your life. That's how we show others that we are an upstander. It's because it's who we are. It's the example we provide. So what might be another example of when folks have looked at you, your career, your involvement in the community? When did they see that upstander step up?
You mean at the beginning or just later, or
at any point in your life?
In my younger years, half a lifetime ago, that would be like in the late 60s, we had the Vietnam War. We marched in the streets of Iowa City where my former husband was working on his PhD, and we pushed our little boy John in a stroller, and we were protesting the war, and we were shouted down by people lining up on the streets, and but we just felt the war was immoral and wrong. And so that was in the late 60s. And then also I got involved in the Nestle infant formula boycott. You know, they were trying to push formula in developing countries instead of natural breastfeeding and things like that. So in the poor, impoverished countries, they had billboards advertising, you know, be modern and do it. You know. So then when women had their babies, they were given an initial supply of infant formula. But when that ran out, then the mothers would dilute the formula they had because they didn't have money to replenish the supply. So they over-diluted, and then that ended up with it affected the mental development of the babies because they didn't have nourishment. And I've been really involved with refugees in the city of Boise. I love tutoring children at 3 different schools, refugee children, because I could empathize with what they had come through and just found them to be remarkable, resilient children.
I'm going to pick up on a word you just used there, because we talk so much in the Wasma Center programming. Can we foster empathy? Can we cultivate a sense? Because empathy is very different than sympathy. I can be sorry for you because that's your story, but I can't walk in those shoes. It's not my story. So I almost become distant from it. But empathy suggests there is a core or commonality of understanding. Maybe the stories are different, but we still feel the pain. That there's a spark of understanding in that. Do you find that is the base for a lot of your actions as an upstander, is that sense of empathy?
That could be. Like recently, like 4 years ago, I was arrested at the Capitol building for being part of Add the Words. It was an act of civil disobedience. We knew we were going to be arrested and fined, and we could face $1,000 fine or go to prison for 6 months, but we were willing to risk that because for the sake of human dignity and equality, I just couldn't imagine I can go anywhere and do whatever I want and be accepted, but yet there's a segment in our society that is criticized and attacked and maligned and all that. So we went and we blocked all the doors to the Senate chambers for 3 hours until they told us to move or be arrested. And so the troopers came in and asked us if we were willing to move, and we all stood tall with our hand over our mouth, and we refused to move. So we were all arrested. And my children didn't know anything about this, and they were shocked, because it was on the 5 o'clock news, made the national news too. But anyway, empathy is the word. 4 of us straight grandmothers from my church were arrested. We were among those 44, the first 44 to be arrested on behalf, and our legislature still refuses to enact any legislation to grant these equal rights to them.
Well, let me go with that a little bit, because there is that interesting aspect of when do we intersect with other communities. So as you just said, okay, you're not a member of the LGBTQ community in the state, yet you're actively standing up for the cause, the right to dignity.
Yeah.
What causes that point of intersection? It's not your story, but it's your cause.
We're all the same kind of people. We're all the same family. Like we're saying, that we're part of the human race. There shouldn't be a distinction between me and them. It's us, and so we have to fight for that.
Yeah.
You can't let this go on and on and on. And people are misdirected. Either they don't know anyone who is LGBT, or they've been listening to other people and believing lies, and and so we have to be a voice for them and help. At my church, the pastor asked those of us who got arrested, the 4 of us, could you stay after church today and we'll have a forum and we'll have people ask questions about why did you do this? Why did you go here? So we have several gay people at my church. They came afterwards and with tears rolling down their face to think that we would go to fight for them, to be treated like human beings.
I know in another episode of The Voices of Idaho, we actually talked in terms, it's always a question that I have in our research and programming. When does the them become an us? When do those that have been viewed as the other all of a sudden we recognize, no, that's us. We're all in this shared experience, this shared journey. It is a part of our core humanity. So I so appreciate that in your story, because I think that is a point that fosters empathy. When I recognize and I don't see difference, but I see this shared journey, that I see this is who we are together. Mm-hmm. We stand up for each other.
And you're missing out when you don't recognize them and the contributions they make to our society. And it's a gift to get to know, to expand your horizons, I guess you could say. Just get to open your minds a little bit.
So in your in our conversation, you introduced that you were marching in the streets with your son John in the stroller. You're a grandmother of 5. What are the lessons you want your children and grandchildren to learn?
I want them to know that they need to speak out whenever they see injustice, cruelty, racism. We're living in turbulent times right now, and it's all around us. If you sit back and just observe this, you're not really there. And my kids are proud of me. Mm-hmm. They didn't understand why I was out there doing all this. And also, I wanted to go to the vigil on June 1st, where the 5,000 people were. And they implored me, Mom, please don't go because of the COVID virus. They said, we don't want to lose you. So I gave in to them, and I stayed home. And I still feel guilty about not being there, because I wanted to be there, but I think I've been forgiven for not being there. Yeah, because
your children are right. We can't afford to lose you in our community.
Yeah.
We talk in terms of the choice to be an upstander, because we know those that choose to be a bystander, that's a choice. They're choosing to do nothing. We would always add to that discussion, in that choice, they have become complicit with injustice. Right. It's in their choosing to be a bystander, they're in essence giving agreement to the injustice. So choosing to be an upstander, though, also comes with choices. In other words, we don't necessarily make the assumption that as upstanders we all have to do the same thing. It's just that we each do something. What would be your lesson for the next generation? What are the things that they could do as upstanders?
When I speak at high schools, I always challenge them at the end that when they see injustice or persecution or bullying, do you just sit there and just kind of look away and be glad that it's not you that's on the receiving end of that? Or do you speak up and try to stop it? And then I'll refer to add the words thing. I'll say, it wasn't easy to go down to the Capitol building and, be there and get arrested. And this one boy practically fell out of his chair. He said, "You were arrested?" Because here I'm this little old lady, how could I have done something wrong? But I do want them to know that they have options and choices, and to try to do it for the betterment of our society. And in all my talks, I do issue that challenge to people. Mm-hmm. Where would we be? I mean, that's how you get change, is when you're out there.
So I'm going to take us back to where this episode began. What do you see as the lessons to be learned from the Armenian genocide?
It all started because the Armenians were scapegoated. And it's like somebody always has to wield power over another group. And they were a minority, even though they were so productive and, successful people. The men in charge of the government decided that they needed to be, annihilated, destroyed, because they were interfering with the plan to have a homogeneous society. And it's just really hard to understand how they could carry out such a brutal act like the Holocaust, which came 25 years later, and that the genocide served as the model for Hitler. But when people don't get involved or try to stop what's happening, that's why it keeps continuing. How many genocides have we witnessed? And then they say never again. And that's such a hollow phrase because it's totally ignored. It's we see it always happening.
And where are the upstanders? Joanne, thank you so much. This has been The Voices of Idaho.
Unfortunately, the Armenian genocide is often called the forgotten genocide. But of course, it still looms deeply in the minds and hearts of the Armenians today. If you'd like to learn more about the Armenian genocide, more information can be found on history.com or even by searching for the Wassmuss Center's Spiral of Injustice Words Have Weight e-booklet. Huge thank you to Kevin Arnsman for letting us use their music in this episode. And again, if you'd like to submit a song to be used in the podcast, you can do so at info@wassmusscenter.org. And of course, huge thank you to Joanne Kachigian for coming on the podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And until then, don't forget to act.
Can we walk this road together? I can't travel it alone. I need someone beside me to help me find my way back home. 'Cause this world is full of anger, and I've been walking through some pain. So if we walk this road together, we can find our way back home again. It's a home of many colors, no ceilings and no walls, but there is room for all our brothers, with no graffiti in the halls. We can share this road together, so if you walk with me, my friend, with you right here beside me, we'll find a home with peace again. It's a home of many colors, no ceilings and no walls, but there is room for all our brothers, with no graffiti in the halls. We can share this world together, so if you walk with me, my friend, with you right here beside me, we'll find our home with peace again.